You are listening to Talking Star Wars. I'm Connor.
And I'm Alex.
We're going to talk about Star Wars today.
As is our usual MO.
And we're going to take some time to spotlight one specific character, the titular Phantom Menace. Is he the titular Phantom Menace?
I believe the Sith in general, the Phantom Menace. But yes, today is a character spotlight on Darth Maul, and later just Maul, who, after his appearance in the Phantom Menace, where he apparently died at the end of Obi-Wan Kenobi, was brought back in a variety of other media, from live action to novels to comics to shows.
And he had a whole other career. Before, spoilers alert, if you have not seen the final season of Rebels, he is killed again at the hands of Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Do we want to get into the how he returned first, or the why?
I think let's sketch out sort of just the details of Maul's life, just for anyone who might not be familiar. So, Darth Maul was a Zabrak, Dathomir male who was given to Emperor Palpatine from the Sisters of Dathomir, powerful witches practicing the dark side magic on their planet, in exchange for being left alone. He was trained as the first secret apprentice we're aware of Palpatine.
And he was constantly champing at the bit after his childhood indoctrination
to kill as many Jedi as possible. So he has this constant rage of wanting to kill Jedi inside of him. He appears in some comics at this time about how much he wants to kill Jedi to set up his desires for that. He most notably appears in the first of the prequels, The Phantom Menace, where he wants to kill Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi. He succeeds in killing Qui-Gon Jinn, but is defeated by Obi-Wan Kenobi. And it doesn't resurface until many years later during the Clone Wars series, when it is revealed that the dark side of the Force kept him alive, and he's in this twisted, half-robotic body, spider-like.
Yeah, it took them about 10 years to bring Maul back. And we see him on this junk planet. They did quite a good job in the Clone Wars, where they first... I don't know if that's the first introduction of the Night Sisters in the Clone Wars series, but we delve more into their culture. And if you listen to our previous podcast, episode 5, The Sith and the Dark Side, you will find out plenty about the Night Sisters of Dathomir. But we find that Dooku needs a new apprentice. He needs a new assassin. And the Night Sisters of Dathomir are pretty open about just giving their men children away, because it is a matriarchal society, I feel. And we learn slowly that this new donation, this new child, is none other than Maul's brother, Savage Opress.
Yeah, so the rest of the plot around Maul and the Clone Wars consists of him making contact with his brother, who has become the new nascent apprentice to Dooku, freeing him from Dooku's control, and then attempting to establish his own little empire and power base, sort of in echo of the Sith, even though he is no longer Darth Maul, but simply Maul.
And when we see him, when Savage discovers him, he's very shook, traumatized. His mind is whirling with different Sith creeds, and I don't know. You could tell that a lot of this came from Palpatine, who probably filled his head with all this. And then just do we find out how he managed to travel from Naboo to this junk planet?
No, it is never told. You simply know that he somehow survived with the dark side and ended up on this junk planet.
I mean, a sweet set of robot legs that were spider-like. Oh, imagine if he kept that look throughout the Clone Wars. Hard to take seriously, but quite menacing.
Yeah. So then Maul has a series of other tribulations, adventures, losses, successes, seizes control of Mandalore, loses control of Mandalore.
Loses his brother.
Yep.
Eventually.
Tries to gain another apprentice, loses that apprentice as he appears in the Rebels series. So, and I think this brings us to the primary aspect of Maul's character we're going to discuss. He's like Sisyphus, the ancient Greek who is cursed by the gods in the underworld to forever roll a boulder up the hill, and just when it gets to the peak, it escapes and rolls back down. Mm-hmm. Because Maul, the character who appears first in The Phantom Menace, and the Maul who dies in the arms of Obi-Wan Kenobi in his final appearance are fairly much the same person.
Mm-hmm.
Maul aggressively refuses to change his outlook, his worldview, his approach. He pursues in different ways the same goal of power and revenge and establishing his own power base.
Mm-hmm.
And every time he's doomed from his own flaws of pride, malice, hubris, anger, and rage to lose everything he has created.
Yeah, he's really trying to set up his own, not empire exactly, but his own sect in the galaxy where he's taken on an apprentice. He is this dark side. Don't call him a Sith, but he's a dark side lord who's taken on one single apprentice, like as if he's following a rule of two. And he quite badassly is trying to consolidate all of the underworld power. So we see these different gangs. He goes to the huts.
Well, I think let's talk about Maul's life in stages.
Oh, sure.
So, yeah, as we start out, we get early life Maul.
Mm-hmm.
And he is, as we discussed, given to Palpatine and indoctrinated from a young age. So his first couple appearances, we see him in chronologically. There are two prequel comics where he is so desperate to kill Jedi that he's just wandering around the underworld of Coruscant, finding people that it's okay to kill. And then he finally catches wind that the Jedi Padawan has been captured and is going to be sold at auction by some crime bosses. And he's like, this is my opportunity to go find and kill a real Jedi. Not a real Jedi, at least a Padawan. And so hiding his activities from Palpatine, he goes out and engages a series of misadventures where he tries not to reveal himself at all with his lightsaber, just, portraying himself as this powerful thug in the underworld and successfully, he crash lands on a planet, has to team up with the Jedi Padawan to survive. And then, of course, once they have survived, he turns on her. They duel. She dies.
Do we, in that book or in any other media, do we get a motivation for why Maul hates the Jedi, other than the Jedi have ruined the universe, caused this cosmic malaise that's, weakening the galaxy? Or is there a Spider-Man-esque, a Jedi killed my XYZ and they must fall?
So no, there's never a tragic backstory. Other than he as a child abducted from his people and indoctrinated by a dark side lord to be a weapon. So that's inherently tragic enough. Mm-hmm. But there's never specifically anything Jedi do to him. It's more like Palpatine has successfully instilled this sense of the Jedi as the other, the problem. Mm-hmm. Like, they don't use the right side of the Force. They have this philosophy that's weak. Mm-hmm. But then Maul kills this Jedi Padawan and he feels nothing. Mm-hmm. He expected to feel some grim satisfaction, and he just feels the consuming emptiness that will define him for the rest of his life. Mm-hmm. Or even when he achieves the goals that he set out for himself, pursuing them with this mindless, relentless, self-deterministic drive that allows him to do and survive being cut in half, mm-hmm. survive the death of his brother,
and survive being stranded on the Sith planet of Malachor for what appear to be years.
He survives all of that, but never changes and grows as a result of these experiences.
Yeah, once he's seemingly killed by Obi-Wan Kenobi and is rescued by his brother, again, he just takes the single apprentice. He's following the Sith code, even though he's not calling himself Darth. He's not following the Sith rule exactly. It's kind of like what I think we talked about a bit. It's just the difference about the dark side versus the Sith. But he's not, again, just shaking that mindset.
So I think this is another way to show that how Maul is trapped by the upbringing he has, his own preconceptions, in that the first thing he does when he's freed from, the robot body that has imprisoned him for so long and is able to make his own choices, he immediately tries to set himself up as a dark side lord, takes on an apprentice, and attempts to exterminate every other threat to his power base, including other dark side users. Mm-hmm. So he's completely unable to escape from his upbringing and his conception of what he should do.
And after he makes these efforts, he makes these attempts to consolidate power, to take over various crime syndicates, to take over Mandalore, he is smacked down pretty hardly by his former master, Palpatine. Palpatine is the one who kills Savage, correct?
Yes, right in front of Maul. Maul he keeps alive as a tool in case he needs him again, because Maul is powerful. But Savage, he has no use for two brothers. So, and Maul knows he does not stand a chance against Palpatine, and in fact does beg for his life, even though he knows it won't work.
Like a bitch. It's like a little.
Well, Maul is also a survivor.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean,
and I think it's also show that
groveling is groveling going to keep him alive.
Palpatine is also sort of his father figure, so
Sure.
I think it's less intended to be more like, oh, former servant growls for his master, more like, abusive father, please stop hurting me again. I left, I'm trying to do my own thing. And Palpatine, like an abusive father, is no, I must destroy everything you have, because you could be a threat to me.
You are mine.
Yeah, and
we canonically go from Maul's defeat to he returns to Mandalore.
correct.
Yeah.
So so his first attempt at a power base is to form to have his brother Savage oppress, and he attained leadership of Mandalore by using the dark saber, which he takes from the Vizsla family, and defeats Pre-Vizsla in combat to become the Mandalore. And then, of course, Palpatine. This then gets Palpatine's attention. So he imprisons Maul, but of course, Maul still has loyal servants on the outside, as any Sith does. And so they break him out of Palpatine's prison, which is in fact the same prison we see in the Clone Wars, because that has already been liberated by the Republic, so Palpatine can use it.
Sure.
A whole episode about it.
It's the Ghost Prison. No, wait, that's another book.
The Ghost Prison is called the Citadel, as depicted in the Clone Wars, and has been repurposed at that point into a prison for Maul and other politically sensitive prisoners for Palpatine during the Clone Wars, as depicted in Darth Maul, Son of Dathomir, a comic series you should check out.
So yeah, he breaks out of this prison, and then that's when he unifies some tri-syndicates to use as a tool, and which will later come on when he is forced off of Mandalore, but then becomes leader of Crimson Dawn, a crime syndicate. So he returns to Mandalore as his strongest power base, and rules there in the very deepest throes of the Clone Wars.
But during this time, Mandalore has been this kind of Viking. You called it the Pits, the Picts, the Scots, the
Celts.
The Celts. There we go. It's a very proud, neutral, isolated society. And visually looking at it, it looks like if Coruscant wasn't gentrified, and it still maintained its old architecture and the culture. And they even have cubism. They have Mandalorian cubism as art. It's fantastic.
We'll do the art of Mandalore in another episode.
That's a 3-hour podcast. But we have this society that's isolated, vulnerable because of its isolation, taken over by Maul. And you see this in real life where you have these other countries and bodies of power who try to stay out of the war, are taken over, and then quickly become taken over. And we get to a very different Mandalorian culture afterwards. And we have Maul to thank for that.
So Mandalore had been trying to transition from a destructive, Civil War-ridden warrior culture into a more closer to the Republic, peaceful political culture that still respected their warrior heritage. But I mean, their queen at that point was a pacifist. Yeah, we'll talk about the problematic inherent natures, perhaps, of pacifism later. But Maul takes advantage of this in their society, murders the person with the darksaber, and then, in the Siege of Mandalore, as depicted in the Clone Wars, tries to hang on to power, but is ultimately defeated by Ahsoka. Again, he has achieved a pinnacle of his power by becoming ruler of Mandalore once again, even after his apprentice is killed, brother is killed by Palpatine, and he is imprisoned. He escapes and seizes power again, and then he loses it all again by attempting to move too fast to seize power, to take advantage of the weakness of the Republic during the final stages of the Clone Wars.
And then we don't see him again until Solo, or is there a comic book in betwixt?
No, I think that's currently where we're at. So he takes an escape pod off of the ship that Ahsoka Tano and Rex are crashing on in the Clone Wars, and then presumably returns to these remaining allies he had used to break out from prison in the underworld, and forges the Crimson Dawn, which by the time of the movie in Solo, even the beginning of it, the Crimson Dawn are already a rising, powerful force in the underworld, taking territory from the Black Suns and other syndicates. And so for the next 10 to 15 years that we know, he is a ruthless underworld crime boss, hidden Sith.
And that's what I really would have liked to see more of, and I hope we get to see more of, because it's, we're making a spotlight episode on Maul because he is a fascinating character. But this period of his life where I'm wondering, is he going in direct opposition against Palpatine and the Empire, or is he simply just trying to establish this power base and be this third pillar?
This is an indication where even if Maul refuses to change, he at least learns from his past experiences, even if that just makes him more cautious while pursuing his goals.
He realizes that becoming the open ruler of a planet or a society is not going to let him survive now that Darth Vader and Palpatine rule the galaxy.
Too big of a target.
Yeah, so he stays in the underground, rules with the Crimson Dawn on the Outer Rim. But then, as with all things with Maul, he has a successful reign as a crime lord, seizes control. We know that Kira from Solo becomes one of his lieutenants. He had people so afraid of him they were throwing themselves out of windows and things to avoid his wrath. But then, the next time we see him, he is a forgotten old man, trapped on the planet of Malachor, with Sith Inquisitors sent to kill him.
When you say trapped like his ship has been crashed, landed?
Yes, so he has no means of escaping and mentions the fact that he's been trapped there for many years. So, my sense, if I had to guess what happened, is that eventually Palpatine and Vader did discover his existence and location, and the Inquisitors pursued him, and he attempted to then retrieve the powerful dark side weapon that was present on Malachor. But as it is built by the Sith, it required 2 Force users to retrieve, so he was trapped there without anything to do, awaiting perhaps Inquisitors or Darth Vader to come end his life, when entering picture comes the other most important character in the final chapter of Maul's life, which is Ezra Bridger from Rebels. To give a short backstory, Ezra Bridger, apprentice to the Jedi Kanan Jarrus, 2 of the main characters in Rebels. They're not particularly good or powerful Jedi, but they're all that they have, and they do their best. Ezra, who had previously sown temptations towards the dark side, finds Maul compelling, who listens and engages with him in a way that his more rigid master Kanan Jarrus does not. And so originally falls under the sway of Maul for a time, helping him retrieve his goals, retrieve a Sith holocron, and finding him compelling.
And he's not... you have the Grand Inquisitor, you have the other Inquisitors, you have Vader. We have this idea of, this is what Kanan and Ezra see the dark side as. And then we have Maul, who's very different. I'm guessing that Maul does not attack Ezra right away with a spinning whirlwind helicopter blade lightsaber, but instead talks to him and entices him.
So we see that, again, with Maul as violent and as unhinged and as unwilling to change as he is still a cunning and powerful darkseid user. And so he takes on, as almost in a direct parallel to how Palpatine takes on this sort of mentor sage role with Anakin Skywalker before his fall. He takes on the appearance of this kindly old man who knows information that you want and is not going to hide it from you like your master does. So he's like, at this point, this dark side sage. He no longer claims the title of Darth Maul explicitly. He simply calls himself Maul. But then as time goes on, it reveals more and more that his impatience starts to come out. But he refers to Ezra Bridger as his apprentice for the remainder of the series, even after it is very clear that Ezra does not want to be his apprentice. Because for Maul, being an apprentice has never been about consent. It's been about who can wield power over the other.
I have power, you have power, I have more power, so I can give you power.
So you are my apprentice. And so the fact that Ezra will not accept this Sith view of things, and it's this view of the world that Maul is entirely unable to shake for his entire life, is what leads to the conflict. So then, Maul and Ezra maintain a connection throughout the rest of Rebels. Through seasons 2 and 3, Maul attempts to kill Kanan Jarrus more than once and comes close, but is then... his second greatest weakness after his pride dominates him in the rest of the series, which is the need for revenge against people who have wronged him. And in this case, he learns that Obi-Wan Kenobi is still alive and sets out to kill him, learning through a complicated ritual with Ezra that it is on Tatooine. And so the final act of Maul's life is searching for Obi-Wan Kenobi on Tatooine, while Ezra Bridger attempts to do the same, knowing him as General Kenobi, wanting him to join the nascent rebellion. So the final scene of Maul's life, he finally locates Obi-Wan Kenobi with Ezra Bridger there. Obi-Wan sends Ezra away. Obi-Wan is dismayed to see that he has not changed at all. They trade a few words, and then Maul attacks, the culmination of everything he's been doing for 5 to 10 years. He's found Obi-Wan Kenobi. He has his lightsaber. The man is old. He's here in the desert. Maul attacks him, and in a single stroke, Obi-Wan defeats him.
Say what you will about the battles of the prequels, I would call them a little bit indulgent. The battles in the prequels are leaning towards this idea that the Jedi at this point are masters. They are not fumbling with a lightsaber like Luke was, because Luke didn't really have a lightsaber master that we see.
Yeah, we shall certainly talk about lightsaber duels in the future, but I think this is a deliberate contrast to that, because these are both two men who are at the peak of their powers.
And Obi-Wan, with his commitment and ability for introspection and change, has surpassed Maul long ago.
And we see that in the change of his lightsaber form, between the saber almost overhead pointing at his enemy, reverting to the two-handed stance that we see him take.
Which is the same stance that his master Qui-Gon took when he dueled him in the Fest. So it's this samurai movie-esque single stroke. Maul attacks, Obi-Wan deflects, and skewers Maul through the chest.
Yeah.
So then they share this final moment, this revenge-driven Maul and Obi-Wan, who has been the unknowing target of his revenge for so many years. And Obi-Wan is sad that it is driven to this. And Maul asks if the Chosen One is on the planet, because Maul, has had this contact with the holocrons, and Obi-Wan does him the kindness of confirming it. And Maul's last words are, "Yes, he shall avenge us," because even in his dying breath, Maul cannot let go of his need for revenge. So no, it's not a hopeful thing that there is this Chosen One who perhaps will overthrow Palpatine, who has abused Maul his entire life, imprisoned him, destroyed everything he's wrought multiple times. No, rather than hoping that can preserve the people, Maul just needs revenge against Palpatine. So in his final moment, he attempts to make a connection with Obi-Wan, like, yes, our shared sense of revenge. But Obi-Wan has given up revenge long ago. And so he just stays with his old enemy until he dies and buries him in the sands. And so passes Maul, and having never grown and never changed, but always relentlessly and in a cunning way pursued his goals without wavering. Not always in the most intelligent way, but always in a compelling way.
And when considering characters in the Star Wars universe, I like to take a step back and take a look at not just what do they do in this movie, but think about what was their impact on the story canon as a whole, and what sort of character archetypes are we dealing with here.
And we should also do Maul the service of talking about his aesthetic, because as with...
He's the devil. He's red-faced, horned, evil, visual. Just, if we look at Maul versus Dooku, Dooku is this old man. He has white hair and a beard. He is aristocratic. He's possibly feeble because he has age. Maul is the flip side, where he looks like evil incarnate.
Yeah. So with these Sith tattoos he's had, so Maul's aesthetic is obviously almost openly evil, and it's openly tattooed upon him by Palpatine, sort of as a signal. He's a Zabrak who has the flesh cut away from the horns on his head to be spikes. And he is the first character to canonically bear a double-sided lightsaber, which he trained with, which was always compelling visually to see. And he maintains that lightsaber for the rest of his life.
And it really helps to just vary up the fighting style. It's much more aggressive. It's, block followed by immediate attack with the other side of the lightsaber.
Yeah. We even see him dual wield his double-sided lightsaber and the dark saber in his desperate attempt to fight Palpatine, which is ultimately a complete failure because he is Darth Sidious.
Is that the only time we saw Sidious fight in the Clone Wars?
Correct. Yeah. Maul has become enough of a threat that Palpatine has to step from the shadows, wield a lightsaber himself, kill two lightsabers himself, kill his former apprentice. Because the risk for Palpatine is that Darth Maul knows who he is and what his ultimate plans are. And in fact, he does try to tell Ahsoka Tano that, Darth Sidious is evil, but until Maul will not reveal the information without her agreement that she will help him. And again, limited by needing everything to be a transactional relationship, he loses what a powerful ally that could have helped him stop Palpatine.
He needs to have control. He needs to be superior. he has the Sith idea of your power is directly equitable to your command.
Mm-hmm.
And even though he's very powerful, he, as mentioned, he's not wise. He's not. He's probably the furthest away from wise that a Force user has become, because he just continues to get into the same patterns of defeat.
Yeah, because we see him be compellingly cunning in Rebels, especially when introducing himself to Ezra. But again, his impatience costs him. He almost had Ezra on his side, but then he moves too fast. He attempts to bring him on. He overestimates his own charisma and underestimates the bond between Ezra and Kanan, and so he does not have any chance to keep Ezra his apprentice. And in fact, it has to desperately flee from Darth Vader when he arrives.
Mm-hmm. To see Vader versus Maul, we have an entire Dark Times to explore that. Why hasn't it happened yet?
It was depicted in a Legends comic as a test for Vader.
Or was it a Clone Maul? I don't even think it was the real
or
Maul.
Dark Side Maul, or was it Clone Maul, Automaton Maul? So some version. So
hologram.
But it was mostly a self-indulgent thing. It's not actual
Mm-hmm.
Maul, actual Vader with the emotional weight of those characters. It's more for the visual spectacle of here's Darth Maul, here's Darth Vader. It's almost like seeing them fight in Star Wars Battlefront.
Mm-hmm.
But seeing like crime boss Maul hiding from Vader's fist and Imperial ruler Darth Vader would be compelling. I don't think Darth Maul survives that encounter.
I don't know. That's we would have to see.
Well, Obi-Wan is because Obi-Wan defeats Maul easily, and Obi-Wan is defeated fairly handily by his former apprentice.
How much do we want to say that was an intentional defeat on Obi-Wan's behalf, where he can sense that he is not powerful enough?
Yes, I guess we do now know that Obi-Wan 10 years earlier was able to stand toe-to-toe with Vader and come out on top. So, but yeah, I still believe that Maul, because Vader, again, is, I think, more willing to adapt, incorporate, and overcome obstacles than Maul is. But as you see, let's take a step back. Let's look at what Maul's character has meant for Star Wars as a whole, the impact, and then what it says about character and setting.
I think it shows his character arc shows how fallible the dark side is, because we see a slew of Jedi and their different ideologies, but the dark side view is very limited. It's it's selfish. It is domineering. Maul doesn't try out other strategies in order to obtain power, other than consolidating the criminal underworld, which you could say is what Palpatine is doing at large. He's consolidating all of the separatist systems into what will become the Empire.
I think Maul is knowingly a shadow of his former master. So I would agree. I think Maul is probably one of the most dogmatic Sith that we see, despite perhaps not truly being a Sith for most of it, but he is never able to escape the shackles of the Sith upbringing that he had. Yeah. And I think it shows in a microcosm, again, yes, the weakness of the dark side with its inability to adapt, where the focus on revenge and power at the expense of all else actually is vulnerable, where once Obi-Wan only barely scraped a victory against Maul as a Padawan at the skin of his teeth, and they go through trials and tribulations, both of them fight far more powerful opponents, where Obi-Wan has allowed himself to grow, and Maul has remained committed to the same anger and hatred that drove them the first time they dueled, is defeated.
And you can actually see the anger in Obi-Wan during their first battle upon the death of Qui-Gon. Quite emotive for a movie that does not deal in very harsh visual emotions, but you can see the anguish, the defeat, and having his master slain. So you can think that Obi-Wan is also dipping into dark side ideologies in order to best Maul, but by the end he is let go of that. He's
sad and he's regretful more than anything else. He didn't want to have to do this, but then as soon as Maul threatens to reveal the existence of Luke, he knows there's only one ending to this. And so he shoulders that burden, but has no joy in what he does by killing Maul in the next, couple of minutes. Yeah.
So I have one last thing. And at the sake of conjuring the ghost of George Lucas, he's
not dead yet. No.
To Star Wars, he is.
Okay.
He had a plan for the sequel trilogy, and his plan was to have Maul as the primary villain, and for him to have an apprentice named Darth Talon. And if you are a Legends person, you know that Darth Talon is a Twi'lek, pretty much palette swap to look like Darth Maul. And George Lucas has had quite an infatuation with this character, putting her in comic books, trying to partner her up in Maul, even though she's based 100 years in the future. They wanted to make a Maul video game that was a prequel, and as soon as George Lucas kind of came around, he said, oh, well, we put Darth Talon in there. They're like, George, Darth Talon doesn't exist until 140 years after Star Wars. Well, just make the game set then. It could be a clone of Maul. And his plan was to have an original crime syndicate, Crimson Dawn Maul, probably not called Crimson Dawn at that point, act as the primary antagonist in the sequel trilogy. Darth Talon as his apprentice, who would combat Han and Leia's son and sway him to the dark side. I think that's a bad idea.
Yeah, I think what they did with Maul was far more compelling in that they used him to show as a character in his time, and then they were willing to let him go and die, which Star Wars should do more of.
Yes.
Is let characters, have their final end and don't have to, of course there's areas to fill in of Maul's life if they want to do more of, his time in the Crimson Dawn specifically. He is briefly depicted in the final season of the Clone Wars as the crime boss that the Martez sisters are talking to, and then of course appears on Mandalore to be defeated by Ahsoka later in that series. But this appears in the Bad Batch.
He does.
Yes, briefly. So that shows that after he escapes Mandalore, he is now rebuilding his criminal network.
There we go.
They haven't
Transitioning.
confirmed that it's Maul, but it's totally Maul and a mysterious hooded hologram.
Oh, sure. And isn't, what's his face? Man with the face lines. From Solo.
Oh, Kira's boss.
Yeah.
Not
Quinlan
Dross.
Quinlan Dross?
No, he's just Dross.
Okay, he has the name that's too close to Quinlan Boss. But regardless, so we know that it's Maul because of him. Mr. Paul Bettany is the actor. I can tell you that much.
Yeah. So, and we know then Kira has the confrontation with Maul. So we know that by the time of Solo, which is set 10 years before the Battle of Yavin, that Maul is a powerful but then 5 years later, he's been reduced to a dark side, cast off on Malachor.
Because he's an unwilling puppet to the galaxy.
As he has been his entire life, and never realizes it, and dies focused on revenge, just as he lived.
And we need to have characters who don't have triumphant ends, but who actually have maybe embarrassing poor ends due to their views. Which, when you think about it, you have... I don't know. I think we're backpedaling, but I think we got it. I think we got it in the bag for Maul.
Yeah, and so this is Maul who continues to push the boulder up the hill. He wants power, he wants influence, he wants respect, he wants fear, and he gets it in droves and continues to push that boulder, and then every time he takes the same path of that boulder up the hill and it falls back down. And is Maul like, do I need to push this boulder up the hill? No, he climbs back down the hill, he grabs the same boulders like this time it's going to be different.
I was going to bring up Charlie Brown, but it's just a lesser analogy.
That was already a Sisyphus reference. So, and that is our character spotlight on Darth Maul. Join us next time for a Force Power spotlight, talking about Force healing and Force lightning.
We've been talking Star Wars. We'll see you sometime soon in a galaxy right here.